Yeah. He can. He definitely can.
Man, but let's talk about our heritage. I know our family, for those of you that don't know, has some very almost a need to know. Like our fathers have done a lot of research when it comes to where we came from, our genetic pool, and all that stuff. You want to talk about some of the research you've done? And
definitely. A while back, and I remember this growing up, my dad doing some of that research, your dad doing some of that research, and then just really recently kind of piqued my interest, and I just started going back. There's a lot of great genealogy tools you can use online. And first, I was kind of focused more on like the last couple hundred years, and I traced our lineage back to a guy named Abraham Brown, who moved from England. I think it was in the early 1600s to Massachusetts. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. That was 10 generations back, and seeing that heritage going all the way back that way. And at first I was pretty satisfied with that. I was like, wow, this is when we came to England. This is came from England. This is where there's a house called the Brown House in Massachusetts still that was built, I think, by his son or grandson. I can't remember exactly, but then I got more curious, and I was like, well, what about before that? And so I started going back, and my dad had alluded to this again when I was younger, that he from the more limited research he'd been able to do, that there might be some like Scandinavian, aka Viking blood, and I started tracing, and once you kind of find a route into anyone that's more in the like royalty, nobility, or whatever, it becomes a lot more clear, the genealogies, because there's better records kept at those levels.
Oh, yeah. Nobody cares about the peasants.
Yeah.
Sorry to say. I mean, they were probably great people.
Yeah.
But
It just
back then,
is what it is.
They didn't have Twitter and, YouTube pages like mine to record their history forever.
I know, forever and ever. And so we start getting into these nobility, and it like very quickly you start seeing people in Normandy. And the Normans were Vikings.
Yeah.
They came to Rollo was a Viking who was just beating on France. I think it was in like the 900s or 1000s, something like that.
Just really getting after
Just really getting
severing heads.
Yeah, he was. They did not like him, but they were pragmatic, those French, and so they gave him Normandy, France, and he became the Duke of Normandy, the first Duke of Normandy, Duke Rollo.
Yeah,
and he's one of our ancestors.
Yeah.
And at least according to the research I did, which I believe, because why not? I mean, yeah.
Which
obviously.
Also, and then a separate route is we're actually also somehow we crossed streams or did a crossover, as Sam was talking earlier today, is we're actually related to Siegfried or
Snake in the Eye of Siegfried.
Sigurd.
Yeah,
Sigurd. Yeah,
Snake in the Eye of Sigurd, and it starts
which is the son of
Ragnar Lothbrok.
Yeah,
it starts getting shaky up at that level too. You kind of like, all right, I'm pretty sure this is accurate, but it feels right.
Yeah, it does.
It definitely feels right.
It explains a lot of what I feel in the blood running through my veins. Mm-hmm. Like, it makes sense.
It explains why we move like every generation.
Yeah, and we were talking about that just the other night. How we as the Browns, we've seen people back in our family that they move to another spot and start something that's awesome. Like our grandfather that died, before we knew him.
Yeah.
Left Ohio and
well, I guess he went down to Miami University in Florida. We talked about that. And he went to Chicago, and then I guess he was in Ohio again, and then he went to Arkansas where he worked as a manager in a factory. The factory went out of business. So he bought it out and started a new one, and it was successful. And he started a real estate business from that. I mean,
and he had a radio station. And
he did all. He was an entrepreneur.
I'm following in my grandfather's footsteps.
Yeah.
But that's typical Norse Viking like fashion, is to go explore the world. They were the great explorers. I mean, they discovered America first.
Yeah, or at least from that side.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, Leif Erikson.
Yeah, as far as like, I mean, there's people obviously already here, but it's interesting. Yeah, that they pushed into like the Middle East and all those areas, like, and they would go and start stuff like Normandy.
Yeah,
they wouldn't always like go back and return to you know.
But yeah, you got to go on to the next place.
Yeah, and settle in Normandy. And then that wasn't good enough, so they went into England and took that over, you know.
And then old Abraham Brown just was like, you know what? It's getting stale. Let's go back to America.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the interesting, like, very basic research that I did that was kind of interesting.
Okay.
So I took all the work that your dad and my dad did, and that big spreadsheet they put together, and we had some really solid names back in England, and I was like, you know what? As much as Google has like collected data, I'm wondering if I can find something like just by Googling, you know, and using Google Maps.
Yeah.
So I was able to actually find a like hospital that one of our great-great-grandfathers built in England.
Oh, wow.
And you can like pull it up in Google's map. It's named after him, all that stuff.
Wow.
And he made it was kind of like a charity deal.
Okay.
It was like a charity hospital, you know?
Wow.
Looks kind of like a castle or something.
Yeah.
But so I found that and I noticed the area it was in, right? So then I'm like, how can I bring all this together? Because I had a feeling that, you know, you read the typical, like, the thing you can buy at a Renaissance fair where it's like, here's your name and like where your family's from and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And in those, it always said that like Brown used to be Brun, like Brun.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to explore this a little more, which is like a Germanic and Norse like name. Mm-hmm. And it like goes back to like brown people or brown hair, or it could use to like describe your eyes or, you know, any number of characteristics. And they use the term Brun. And I'm like, well, how did this shift to Brown, right? And I'm like, how did the Germanic Norse make their way to England? So I started exploring that, and I noticed that, yeah, they raided down into France. They were raiding England too, but like the big push from the Norse people was from Normandy into England, and like really taking it over and settling in.
Yeah.
And during that time, it was when Rollo, it was either one of Rollo's like sons or something made the big push. It was like King Harold or something.
That sounds right.
And they pushed into England and they defeated everybody. And they're like, okay, we're in charge now. And he decided, hey, I'm going to make money off of everybody, right? Because I'm going to collect. I'm the king. So he made what is known as the Doomsday Book. And this book was a huge census where they went all the way around England, his, you know, people or whatever, his tax collectors.
Yeah.
And they did a very detailed census of people's names, job, and like the area they live in, right?
Yeah.
So you have this book that has like name, job, and like where they live or whatever. And that way they could like have a record. Hey, let's go collect money for that. And they know where to go and who's there and who to collect money from, right?
Right.
So in my research, I'm thinking, hey, if there is a way to look at this book, you should see the names Brun or Brown, right?
Yeah.
Because I was able to find Brown like out to like a certain date, but then there was like this gap. I'm like, where did Brun come into England? You know, or where did that transition happen from Brun to Brown, if that's the case?
Right.
Well, just so happens, they've taken this Doomsday Book and they've uploaded it online.
Nice.
Into a searchable, categorical, like, online archive.
Yeah.
And so I think to myself, okay, if Browns were in existence before the Norse came into England, then the Brown name should be in the Doomsday Book because they did a huge census of all the people in England, right?
Yeah.
So the name Brown would be showing up in there frequently if it was used, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? It's not in the book.
Really?
The name Brown, huge English name, right? Very English name. I just met a guy from Wales the other day, and he's like, "Oh, your name's Brown." Like, "Oh yeah, it's a very English name, right?" Did not exist during that time.
Yeah.
Guess what I searched for? Brun. Tons of names.
Yeah.
And they were like scattered in kind of these different positions, and they kind of held positions of titles and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I started putting two together. I'm like, you know what? And then you could, there was also Bruns like that came over with Harold, like in his like top guys or whatever.
Right.
So to me, that means our family pushed over with the Vikings into England, took over and set up shop. They were given lands because, they helped take it over. That's how the Vikings worked. You go along and you get part of the shares. And then at some point, the mixture of the languages between the Norse and the existing native English people, it switched to Brown.
Yeah. Some point in there.
Yeah. But it just kind of confirmed that, we are. It's just another route that confirmed sort of what we saw through the genetic testing too. And
yeah. I mean, that's all pretty cool, man. It's just like, it really makes you think. You really start thinking like, what would my ancestors think about this or that? What were they like? Obviously the further back you go, the smaller and smaller percentage you are part of that person. But it's still interesting because you can still see some of the same patterns in them that you see in our family.
Yeah.
So it just mathematically it shouldn't make that much of a difference, but it seems like it does.
Well, on a little more scientific level, this isn't really about Norse. I mean, my father had the genetic testing done through the Ancestry and National Geographic.
Oh, wow.
And the interesting thing about the National Geographic one is they give you a percentage of how your genetic code matches up to how much percentage of Neanderthal you are. Did you know this? So
I think that's a bunch of nonsense.
Really?
Yeah.
You should look into this.
I will.
So they're trying to say now that Neanderthals were like a separate species than human, and that we basically crossed streams at some point.
Yeah.
And so there's certain percentages of Neanderthal in people.
Yeah.
And a normal, like some people don't have Neanderthal apparently.
Yeah.
Or like very small percentages. And then like a high rate of Neanderthal is like 1.5% or something like that.
Yeah.
Guess what we are? Or my father is. It's
I
like
don't know.
1.6, 1.7. So high on the Neanderthal scale.
Yeah.
Which also makes sense. Because Neanderthals were known as like this, we got the brow or, big brow, thick skulls.
I'm thinking we should get some helmets and get some more of these, and like wear them around.
For sure.
Even though that's not something the Vikings did.
No.
But
no, not at all.
But they clearly should have.
Yeah.
Because of how popular it is.
Dude, I've
now.
seen some of the cool armor that the Vikings used to wear. I went to the National, Archaeological Museum in Ireland.
Yeah.
And, the Vikings raided the crap out of Ireland and England and everywhere else. But a lot of them settled there, too. They had some really cool stuff, like old helmets, everything. They were not horned. They were like metal helmets with, like the nose cover.
They were actually practical.
Yeah. Yeah. And the coolest thing was seeing a set of Viking bones that they had.
Yeah.
That they had found in these marshes in Ireland. Bodies get preserved like crazy. They have bodies from forever ago that you can still make out a lot of detail. And their skin's still on them and everything.
Yeah. They're mummified basically.
Yeah. By the mud.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
You just kind of die in mud. And there was they're able to see hey, this guy had an axe wound in his skull and stuff like that. It's very clear what happened to him,
Yeah.
Now the situation surrounding it, some of them were their hands were bound and they had an axe wound in their skull and stuff like that. But this Viking dude, he was found in a Viking burial site with a boat and everything. And they had a sword there. like next to him and everything. You could just tell like he was buried with his sword, and like he was obviously like higher up on the scale, you know. But these bones were huge.
Really?
Like laying in this big glass case, he was like 6'5".
Wow.
Like or
This is a big
like
dude.
6'2".
Yeah.
6'2" of skull. That's without like your
Bones
without
the
your flesh and muscle and everything else that would like, you know, a little padding on the bottom of your feet and everything like that.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it, you're like, this dude was a monster of a man.
Yeah.
Like, there was definitely something to that. And if you look at the bodies of the other people they find in these marshes in like Ireland and stuff, they're like little people. And you start to really wrap your head around how all this lore that came around, like how devastating the Vikings were.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And their shield walls, and they just come in and wreck shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it's
it makes sense.
crazy.
They were basically like giants compared to these people.
Yeah.
You know?
I always wonder, you know, that makes me think of, you know, the shield wall makes me think of like how warfare, the practices of warfare spread and everything. And I'm no expert on ancient warfare by any means, but the Viking shield wall always makes me think of the phalanx, you know, of Roman and Greek style of fighting, of having a shield wall, and you know, sort of maintaining that very tight unit cohesion, and you just let the enemy just kind of wear themselves out, and you like slowly pick them apart till they rout, and then you chase them all down and kill them.
Yeah.
And I a lot of times I wonder, are these all things? When you look at how far away Scandinavia is from, say, Greece, is this something, a tactic that slowly traveled across the continent over hundreds or, you know, 1,000 years? Or is it something that just, you know, kind of was developed independently because it's a good idea?
Yeah.
It's like
Trial and error.
hey guys, let's stand real close together with our shields, you know,
Yeah.
see how that works.
And